The combination of species you have in the Azores is unique.
The fact that we're sitting right on top of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge in a place where all these different animals converge during their annual migrations.
This expedition gathered a huge amount of information so that we know what are the opportunities for conservation.
The Azores suffers from increased human pressure.
Which areas are best preserved, which areas need more attention.
We now realized how important it is to protect this very special place. New generations, they feel that the ocean is their heritage and they need to do their best to help preserve it.
You never know what you're going to find when you get in the water to study these areas.
Just to discover what's out there.
There are species that are found only here and nowhere else in the world.
And species to be discovered still.
The devil rays, the mobulas that we find here in the Azores are quite mysterious because we know very little about their ecology. What are they doing during their travels and their really deep dives? It's very understudied. If the animals move forward all the time, we can use something different to tag the mobulas without being so invasive. We should try to attach the tag to the devil rays collar that would go on the sides of the cephalic fins.
These expeditions, they allow us to think out of the box and try new methods. The end goal of this expedition is to help leave a permanent mark on the conservation of these ecosystems.
Now we're going to have a roundtable chaired by the President of the Executive Committee of the Oceano Azul Foundation, Tiago Pita e Cunha.
Participam os oradores.
Speakers will be the trustees of the foundation, Princess Laurentian van Oranje-Nassau, Jane Lubchenko, and Nuno Vieira Matias. And the current special councillors, Juliet Packett and Viriat Romano Marques. Good morning, everybody. We're now going to start the roundtable with the trustees of the Oceano Azul Foundation. As was mentioned, the project of the foundation is a collective project that right from the very start tried to attract talent on the international level in the area of conservation and education of oceans. The Council of Trustees here present reflects this spirit It reflects the spirit and the experience and the diversity of its members, being one of the most important assets of the Oceano Azul Foundation. So before I start to introduce my panel, I would like to ask you all to understand that we are going to move on to English so as the non-Portuguese speakers of the panel can follow it. And so now I'm going to move on to English.
Before introducing the participants of this panel, I wish also to join José Soares dos Santos in expressing my profound gratitude for your decision to assist the Oceano Azul Foundation in developing its actions and in helping us shaping its spirits, its values, and its principles. Your participation in the Foundation's governing bodies, and here I include, of course, also the Board of Directors, is extremely important. Organizations in their first years of existence are naturally associated with their figureheads, with the people who leads them. And your leadership is, for us, an assurance of a brighter future for the Oceano Azul Foundation. And I will now proceed with a brief presentation of the members of the panel. And I start with Princess Laurentine van Ogen-Nassau, President of Fauna and Flora International, and a special advisor, former special advisor of WWF, and currently also special advisor of Rewilding Europe, and a fellow of the European Climate Foundation. Princess Laurentine established the Missing Chapter Foundation, which promotes empowerment, youth empowerment, and intergenerational dialogue between children and business leaders. You have written several children's books, which are translated into 8 languages. I understand now 9 with Vietnamese. Almirante Nuno Vieira Matias, he was the Navy Chief of Staff, Navy Commander and Commander-in-Chief of the Iberian Atlantic Area. He was member of the Ocean Strategic Commission and Chairman of the Naval Academy. He is Vice President of the Board of the Lisbon Geographical Society and a member of the Academy of Sciences of Lisbon. He is also invited professor at the Institute of Political Studies from Universidade Católica Portuguesa. Professor Jane Lubchenco is a former administrator of the National Oceanic Atmosphere Agency of the United States, a distinguished university professor and advisor in marine studies, and until very recently, you were the US envoy for the oceans. You've been also nominated by President Obama in 2008 as a member of his Science Dream Team, and you are a marine ecologist and an environmental scientist by training. Mrs. Julie Packard is a special advisor to the Board of Trustees and is Executive Director of the very famous and known Monterey Bay Aquarium in California. You are also a trustee of the David and Lucille Packard Foundation and the chair of the board of the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, MBARI. You are also a member of the Pew's Ocean Commission and a member of the Joint Oceans Commission Initiative in the United States. And Professor Viriato Romeiro Marques, also a special advisor to the Board of Trustees, teaches political philosophy, philosophy of nature, and European ideas in the departments of Philosophy and European Studies of the University of Lisbon. Since 1978, he has been engaged in the civic environmental movement in Portugal and in Europe. He was Vice Chair of the European Environmental and Sustainable Development Advisory Council's Network, a coordinator of the Gulbenkian Environmental Programme, and a member of the high-level group on energy and climate change of the European Commission. And with these introductions, I will start and informal conversations with the panel so that we benefit from your visions as well and from your ideas. And as a first question, I will start from that end to this end. So I will start by Professor Soromenho Marques. As I said in your presentation, you are a philosopher and a researcher. So with this luggage, how do you think we can solve the following dilemma? There is a trend not only to proceed with the economic exploitation of the oceans, but even to increase this exploitation. While at the same time, its environmental degradation is getting closer to the limits beyond which the ocean may not be capable of restoration. How will you address this dilemma?
Thank you very much, Tiago. I think that the starting point is probably the need for us to be critical about the way we understand the oceans. If we look to our planet in an objective manner, we'll find that the name of our planet, Earth, is a wrong name. We are speaking about a planet with more than 2/3 of its surface being made of water. So this is the first mistake of perception, so to say. And another fact that's very important is to understand that we don't know too much about the oceans, given the fact that if you look, we compare the cartography of Venus and Mars, we know much more about the accurate cartography of those planets than about our Earth, because the oceans cover and hide our orography and our cartography. This being said, I think that the dilemma that you mentioned is shared not only by the oceans, but by the entire Earth system. Meaning that we are doing, as a human species, as a humankind, we are doing exactly the opposite that we should do in order to find a new way to live on Earth. And I think that the oceans are a very critical symptom of what I usually call the global environmental and social crisis. I am aware that there are other ways to speak about the state of our planet and of the oceans. I know very well that some authors like Paul Crutzen framed the expression Anthropocene epoch for our time. Will Stephan, for instance, worked in the idea of the planetary boundaries. And even myself and others are working on the concept of the Safe Operating Space Treaty. So we have many ways to describe what is happening, but I think that environmental crisis, and oceans is a symptom of that, has basically 5 main symptoms, so to say. It's a planetary dimension, so a crisis with a planetary dimension, and we may see that, for instance, in climate change, we don't have any sanctuaries in climate change. It's felt all over the planet. The second is a crisis characterized by irreversibility and entropy. That's the case, for instance, of biodiversity extinction. The third one is the cumulative acceleration. We may see that in the acidification of the oceans. It's a cumulative process in time. And also, the fourth characteristic is a crisis that is driving growing political and social unrest. We have now great problems in terms of environmental security. And finally, I think probably the most serious, it's a kind of ontological debt crisis, because we are using the resources of the coming generations. So we are paving the way for a very bad future for our kids and the coming generations. To conclude, I think that as a philosopher, I think that this crisis is not just a technical problem, although we have a dangerous race between problems and solutions. I think it's a moral and political question. What kind of human beings will we be if we are not able to overcome the global danger for the entire planet contained in this hubris process of dominating the earth and destroying the resources? How can we preserve any kind of self-esteem as human beings, or any type of positive consideration about us as humans, if we are not able to build our life as humanity according to our knowledge and to our ethical values. I think this is the question mark for our generation.
Thank you very much. I think that your question mark can also be an answer. The solution is therefore in our principles and in our values, and I think that what you're implying is that we have to live up to them. Thank you. I'm going to now ask Mrs. Julie Packard. You have key roles in all the institutions that I have nominated. What, in your view, are the advantages and even the synergies, if one may speak of, between philanthropy, between research, science, Mabari, and also with an aquarium, such as the Monterey Bay Aquarium? Because, you know, it's very interesting for a foundation as this one, which can also develop a special connection with the Oceano de Lisboa.
Yes, well, let me start by thanking Jose and his family for this absolutely remarkable commitment. It's so exciting and so very much needed. As I shared when I first heard about this program and this idea, the idea of Portugal taking on leadership among the European countries and the world to find solutions and lead the way for ocean conservation, I found to be extremely inspiring, and I hope that everyone embraces it. It's just really a wonderful opportunity. So our families had the unusual opportunity to put together these ideas very similar to what is being spoken about here, and I've been devoting myself to making that real for pretty much all of my adult life, so I've thought a lot about it. And I think there are some very unique and valuable advantages to this triad of philanthropy and science and a public institution. As far as philanthropy goes, in the US and elsewhere, of course, the government mainly funds the academic enterprise and the government-funded science. And too often in that framework, one cannot take risks. Scientists are not able to take risks or to work across disciplines, which increasingly is very much needed to understand how our oceans work and what the solutions might be. And the value of philanthropy is that it can fill the gaps where government-funded science is not answering the questions, and it also can encourage collaborations and steer research in new directions where it's needed. So even though the government is always going to be the major funder of basic science and applied science, philanthropy can play a very critical catalytic role. And I really applaud that. Our foundation has been able to fund some very interesting lines of research. And along with that, actually, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, the research institute that we created as a sort of an outgrowth of our aquarium, had a special focus on technology. My father, David Packard, being an engineer, that's what really caught his fancy, that the ocean science community did not have dedicated technology and dedicated engineers to work side by side to create the technology to answer these questions that we need to understand in the ocean. So that's another example of where private philanthropy can really make a difference. As far as the science that needs to be done, we need to move from just doing basic science that's answering questions and characterizing the ocean and understanding it, which right now, still a lot remains to be done, but to couple that with solutions about its conservation. And so again, that's why having these enterprises linked together is such a wonderful opportunity. Because having an aquarium is like the mouthpiece for the science, and also a wonderful convener where you can bring decision makers, policy makers, the public together to forge solutions, to share what they know. I believe strongly that the biggest challenge in ocean conservation isn't really about anything happening in the ocean itself. It's about us, and it's about the lack of public awareness and conviction and motivation about forging solutions. That's where aquariums can play such an important role. There's so much negative, scary information out there about what's happening to our global environment. People need hope. They need positive examples. They need great ideas they can rally around. They need to view it as a human issue that we together can solve. And aquariums are a wonderful place to do that, where we can take our kids, our families, become inspired, and have the aquarium demonstrate where people of all ages are making a difference where they live to create a positive world for all of us. So those are why I think it's a great idea to have these three things together, and I wish you all the very best. You have an amazing aquarium here, amazing philanthropic commitment, and a very strong history of science here in Portugal, so all the ingredients are there.
Thank you very much. No, so this is, I think, quite interesting, because now we figure out that there are three ingredients that are very important. People, and the people that needs to change behaviors and visit aquariums, science and technology, and generosity. So that goes through the philanthropy. Let's have this in mind. Professor Jane Lubchenco, you have a vast experience as a member of the executive of the former Obama administration, as a special US envoy for oceans, and of course as a university teacher. So you meet people from different backgrounds of life and you traveled a lot. My question to you is that with all that experience, what do you think it's really the level of awareness of our societies regarding the ocean challenges? Is it something that we can sleep well nowadays because it's a done deal?
Thank you, Tiago. And Jose, my personal thanks to you and your family for making this wonderful opportunity possible. This is really so exciting to be here with all of you and to build on the great groundwork that has been laid. And thank you for all your work on that, Tiago. It really is a moment in time. And I think that this is the ocean's time. And this is an opportunity for Portugal to really be on the leading edge of making things happen in terms of science, public awareness, actions towards solutions. And what I've observed, Tiago, is that the oceans are changing in ways that we never could have imagined before. The rate of change, the scales of change, the kinds of changes are absolutely unprecedented. Scientists use the term no analog state, meaning there's nothing like this that we've ever had before. People are vaguely aware that some of the things are happening, but I think the totality is pretty sobering. The oceans today are higher because of sea level rise. They are warmer. They're more depauperate. They are stormier. They hold less oxygen, and they're becoming more acidic. And in short, they have been depleted and disrupted. And that has very real consequences for people. And there is generally either a lack of awareness that this is happening, or there is a willingness to shut down all that doom and gloom because it seems so overwhelming, it's not possible to do something about it. And while the challenges are absolutely huge, it is not hopeless. And we are seeing changes, solutions bubbling up all around the world that are providing hope, providing models for how to use the ocean without using it up, how to live in harmony with one another and with the ocean. That doesn't mean doing the same things we used to do. It means becoming smarter about what we are doing and how we do it. So fishing smarter, not harder, is an example. So at the time that we have all these massive changes underway, We also are asking more and more of the ocean. Right now, over 3 billion people depend on seafood for an important source of protein. The human population is growing. There are more and more countries that are looking to the sea for food security. And when people generally use the language food security, they tend to think grains, livestock, things on land. But in reality, we can't talk about food security unless we're talking about the ocean. And that means fisheries and aquaculture, both. At the global scale, we have big challenges with respect to fisheries, but we also have discovered ways to fish smarter, not harder, to change the incentives for fishermen and for communities and for businesses to be using smarter business practices, smarter fishing practices. And we've seen very dramatic reversals where fisheries are coming back, they're becoming more sustainable, they're becoming more profitable, and that in fact is the way forward. So people generally either don't know the problems exist or think the problems are too overwhelming to do anything about. And what the real opportunity is to provide a sense of urgency coupled with hope and empowerment. And that's the magic that I think this troika that you and Julie were just speaking about has to develop more solutions. One of the challenges with these solutions is figuring out how to replicate them, how to scale them up. We know a lot of good things. They're just not at the scale that is needed. And so to replicate those, to scale them up, to empower people to be creating more solutions and become part of the solution, not part of the problem. And this is a moment in time where if we can have children be engaged in this, we can have adults engaged in this, fishermen, fishing communities have a key role to play, politicians have a key role, scientists have a key role. This is some opportunity for us to come together as a global community and chart a new future. It's a big, bold challenge, without a doubt. But I'm reminded of a saying that is perhaps appropriate for Portugal, and that is, a ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what it was built for. And we are not built to stay in our safe harbor. We are built to go out and to explore and to find new solutions, new hope, new empowerment, because we can be the solution, working together. And I think there are huge, great opportunities to do that. But public awareness is key.
Excellent, thank you very much. It is quite clear that when we speak about public awareness and when you have mentioned that this isn't a change that we are witnessing on the ocean without precedent, knowing that so many people do not realize that the oceans are changing to start with, says that there is a lot of work to do in relation to awareness. Thank you very much. And Almirante Vieira Matias, you have retired from your active duty, but I've been working with you since this time, and you seem to be always busy. I would even say that you are more busy now that you have retired than before. I know about your passion for this subject, for the oceans, and I know about your passion for Portugal. But what makes you run?
Thank you very much for your kind question, Tiago. But before answering it, allow me to congratulate Sociedade Francisco Manuel dos Santos as a founder of the Oceano Azul Foundation by outstanding public example of altruism and philanthropy that such initiative encloses. Congratulations, Mr. José Soares dos Santos, on behalf of all society and of all the family. Thank you very much. Going to your question, in fact, to be retired takes a lot of work. And I have to say that I feel very happy in being busy because I'm trying to work for a cause I think is important for my country and for people in general. It is the cause of oceans, or to be more precise, oceans, the seas, and coastal waters. In fact, my 45 years long Portuguese Navy active duty career gave me a very large opportunity for knowing the oceans and people dealing with them around the world, and to understand the huge importance they have for humankind now and in the future. I have been in all Portuguese-speaking countries and places around the world, all being maritime spaces, visited most of NATO countries as well as many other coastal places in the oceans. In fact, 3 oceans I sailed already. From all such experiences and knowing well my own country, its maritime history, existing and future links to the seas, I felt that I should support the ideas about the seas. So I am taking all the opportunities I can for stressing the importance of the sea for Portugal and, of course, for all humankind. I am always trying to gather a group of stubborn people about the ocean, o grupo dos teimosos do mar, if you allow me to speak in Portuguese. And I am very happy to see a lot of them here in this, including international people, as you I am looking for. And as always as I can, I use the opportunities and people's patience to talk about the seas in my 4 academies, in the universities, all the conferences, and so on, and so on. Only a few examples. I was part of Ocean Strategic Commission with Tiago a long time ago. I was 7 years president of Marine Academy, participated in many private initiatives researching about the cluster of maritime economy and so on. And I must say that it was very important for me, an example I got from a Dutch friend of mine, which I met regularly for over 20 years. We had a twin career, and I got many articles, ideas, and discussions about the cluster of maritime economy. He was Admiral, I'm sorry for the pronunciation of Dutch, Kees van Dijk. We were at the same time in different NATO perspectives, and I got a lot of information I used here to catch teimosos do mar for the opportunity the maritime economy can give to the Portuguese people and to the country. So the sea is for me a purpose always in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Almirante Filho Matias and Princess Laurentine. You wrote children's books, as I said. One of them is translated by, I think, the Gulbenkian Publishing into Portuguese. My kids loved Mr. Finney, and one of my kids is here, so I'm not lying. And on this book, Mr. Finney is a being half human, half fish, and he travels through the planet and he discovers the ocean suffering. What urged you to write such a book?
Anger. I think as an author, I'm sure that there are many authors here, anger and curiosity, and it was in 2007 that I read in the newspaper that the Russians had put a flag on the Arctic, on the 4,000 meters under the ice. And I read this in the newspaper, and I thought, now we have proof that we as a mankind have gone collectively mad. And what do I mean by that? We have all the science and the data. We know that the Arctic is a symbol of the balance of the planet. So we have everything we need to act wisely. And why on, not planet, on the Earth, and why on the ocean, are we acting the way we're acting? That was one moment of anger. The second one was when I was looking in the newspaper, the rest, and it was, for me, it was an article just like any other article in the newspaper, but not for me. And I thought, how can we accept that we can take this as news like that? And it was all about the economics, and of course I know that we put a flag because we want to appropriate it like medieval times. We take out the oil. So I wanted to introduce, you talk about morality, the moral questions on the table. And I realized by talking a year and a half with scientists, with politicians, with business leaders, with all kinds of people, that we need help. But I also felt that everybody wanted to get those issues on the table. I wasn't getting the answers, and then I started talking to young people and children, and I realized that they are the ones who can help us get this right. And as a result, I started indeed working on that. And all the issues that were mentioned, the fact that everything is connected, head and heart, oceans and land, the bio-based, the blue and the circular economy. We talk about the SDGs and how SDG 14 is connected to all the other SDGs. Children understand this. We are constantly underestimating the wisdom of children. And I believe, and Mr. Finney is just one instrument as a book, the Kids Council that I have in companies, in 75 companies, is another way. We need to bring that anger, action-oriented notions that we should be having, the sense of discomfort, we should bring that into our world. Otherwise, we will talk and talk and talk. And so that is one thing that I feel very strongly about. And the issue of cooperation. Again, children understand more than anyone else. You will not, alone you go faster, together you go further. So that is what got me excited, and I feel that the spirit of this organization, we're just on a journey. You've had a very thoughtful journey so far, starting with the Estoril group. That spirit you need to have, and I would like to contribute indeed to this wonderful initiative by igniting this in a lot of people from different walks of life and different experiences.
We are very appreciative of that. And I think I would, if you allow me, kick off a second question, because you were talking about children. And I understand that your motto is that when we discuss climate change and when we discuss ocean environmental sustainability, these are two serious issues to be discussed by adults only. So how do you suggest to involve the children in also discussing these issues?
Yes, thank you. Building on what I was just saying, I think that it's about getting the right basic notions. So if we know that children, if we accept that children learn differently, have a lot of basic knowledge, yes, it needs to be ignited, but having the understanding at the basic level, we need to turn them, we tend to think of young people as target groups of our information, we as adults. But I just mentioned that I think we think in our systems. The reason we're in this mess in the planet is because we have our short-term thinking, and that's how we've established our systems. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having to go from linear to circular economies if we'd understand those concepts. So if we understand from the basic conception that children have a lot more drive and a much more serious position in society, we need to turn them into change makers. So when we talk about a blue generation, when we talk about ocean literacy, to not fill them just with our information, but to ignite what is in them, empower them to get their families going. I think that the Oceanarium's program on plastics was a very good example on that, where suddenly you start separating waste, for example. The children need to be empowered to be the change agents within their families, and then you get the adults with it who need to follow on this moral drive that the children can bring. And I think that that's why I was very excited when I had my initial conversations with you, but with José, to really say that is a key component and not as an add-on. Oh yes, we need to teach children. No, they are a key serious stakeholder who can make sure that we are not saying, yes, this comes later. We want to turn those programs into real educational programs, but not in the traditional way.
Great. So involving children, in a way, is the real bottom-up approach that we can adopt in order also to address all these questions that we've been addressing, or the crisis of the oceans.
Yeah, they are the disruptors that we really need to disrupt our systems.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And then I probably, Jane, I would ask you a completely different question, which is also this moment more appealing to your political experience. Knowing that the ocean's problems have been worsening and that things can still go worse before they will go better, do you think the solution is a political one? And taking advantage of the fact that we have the Undersecretary General of the United Nations here in the room responsible for legal affairs and oceans, in this context, what do you think should be the role of the United Nations?
Part of the challenge here is to begin thinking more holistically instead of binning every problem and every solution. And I think that the answer to, where do we look for leaders to move in these new directions, building on the good things that are happening, accelerating those, amplifying them. I think it's leadership from multiple quarters that is needed. And if we look to the solutions that are working now, that are providing hope, that in fact we can achieve a more sustainable future, those solutions are coming from combinations of, in the case of fisheries reform, which I've been fairly involved in, the solutions have involved leaders in the fishing community, leaders in coastal communities, leaders in science, in government, and in civil society, in NGOs, working together to say, what's broken? What isn't working? We all want, fishermen want to be better stewards. They don't want to overfish. How do we change the rules for them to empower them to be better stewards? And the examples that I've seen firsthand in the United States, but also in a number of other countries, developing and developed countries, suggest that it is quite possible to end overfishing, to recover depleted fisheries, and to bring them back at a much higher level of abundance where they can be fished sustainably with more profits, but also have more fish left in the ocean because they play a key role in the ocean ecosystems. So people are wary of a win-win-win solution. Well, I've seen it happen. It is possible. And we need to learn from those examples. But it wasn't any one leader from any one of those sectors that made that possible. It was really people showing leadership across often communities that are at odds with one another. And finding that common ground, building on that, using science, but using the knowledge that fishermen bring can bring some magical solutions. And so getting away from this, it's your problem, no, you're the problem, no, you're the problem, coming together and saying, hey, we're all in this together, how can we chart a different future? One of the things that we've seen across all these different hopeful solutions that are emerging, not only on the fisheries front, but creation of fully protected marine areas, doing marine spatial planning, creating lots of innovations for renewable energy across all of those. What we are seeing is the power and the importance of incentives. Now, when I say incentives, many people automatically think economic incentives, and in fact, that can be a very strong motivator. Economic incentives can be changed so that there's a better alignment of short-term self-interest with long-term both self-interest and communal benefit. But it's not just economic incentives. Social incentives are equally important. Changing social norms so that what used to be acceptable is no longer. We've seen that happen with smoking, with drunk driving. Social attitudes have changed 180 degrees, and what used to be everything, everybody accepted it, is now no longer acceptable. It's possible to change social norms and personal norms. What we each think of is the right thing to do. And so tapping into and focusing on incentives as a way of changing behavior. You know, if we're focused on how do we use the ocean without using it up, that means being good stewards, but it also means changing incentives so that what we are doing, for example, with the blue economy, is consciously making a choice between short-term economic benefit for a few versus long-term economic prosperity for the many. Those are the choices, and we need leadership across all of the players to make that happen.
And indeed, you think that the bottom-up approach is also probably the best one, the approach that comes from the communities, in the case of the fisheries, from the fishing communities. Would you think that an organization like the United Nations, which is at the global level, would also have a say, or you are not so favorable to?
I don't believe in the dichotomy of either bottom-up or top-down. I believe we need both, especially given the urgency of where we are now. And it cannot be a top-down government, UN, national government, local government forcing people to do something. That's not the answer. The government can be an enabler, it can change incentives, but there has to be a bottom-up. People that are closest to the problem often have some of the best ideas about what the solutions are. And so bottom-up and top-down are really important. And that top-down is at multiple levels of government, including the global level, including the United Nations. And the creation of the SDGs is a major...
SDGs, I have to translate to people, are the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, which are driving the United Nations up to 2030, and one of them is on oceans sustainability.
Correct. So the creation of these new goals for the world for the next 15 years when they were adopted is a big, bold statement about how we need to move together. And that's important.
And that's where you see the role of the United Nations.
But the UN is not going to unilaterally make that happen. For that to happen, there has to be empowerment of communities, of children, of academics, of local governments. And therein lie some of the challenges. But we know how to do this. We have to have the political will, and we have to have the public willingness to be better stewards, because it's in our self-interest, but it's also a moral responsibility.
Thank you very much. I think it is clear for me. Almirante, José Soares dos Santos mentioned different areas for the Foundation's action. He mentioned the educational, the literacy area, he mentioned conservation, of course, and mentioned capacity building. which of these areas is the one which you find that can be more important, being it in terms of the impacts that it generates or in terms of the long-term effects that it creates?
Give you a very concise answer. I should say that the three are important because they have in common one thing, that is the marine sustainability. It's the final goal. And I think that marine sustainability is the fundamental challenge that policymakers and society in general must address. How to achieve a sustainable use of the ocean that ensures that marine goods and services are available for future generations while meeting the demands of human population growth and economic growth. That's the big and important question. This is the central question. In a report, I was one of the reviewers prepared by the European Academy of Science Advisory Council, named Marine Sustainability in an Age of Changing Oceans and Seas. There one can find recommendations that fit well on those three pillars, like, for instance, for literacy, efforts intensification is recommended to enhance public understanding of the importance of the ocean and humankind and the basis for a better appreciation of the environmental costs of economic development. Improved information is needed on the current knowledge of ocean issues in the population to guide ocean literacy and citizen science initiatives. For human capacity building, the third pillar, greater attention needs to be given to developing human expertise in the combination of integration of individual marine science to support data interpretation. This requires, and I have to follow my notes, enhanced training of specialists in key disciplines and steps to ensure their retention as a valued part of marine science structure, and also focused training of interdisciplinary integrative marine science. For conservation or sustainability, we can recommend several measures involving, and I only refer 2 words for each, or 2 or 3, and they are climate change, implementation of ecosystem-based management, impact assessment of marine spatial planning, increased and sustainable ocean harvest, network of marine protected areas, organizing marine science to support marine sustainability, and I do agree with you to go top-down and bottom-up, both. Of course, each one of these measures should have been developed if time allows me, but I know time is a very scarce
Thank you
resource.
for your comprehension.
Thank you.
And understanding. Julie, I hope that I can call you a conservationist. You are someone that are really worried with nature conservation, and you've been dedicating your life to it. People sometimes need to know which, in your opinion, to be concrete, what's, in your view, the most pressing issues for ocean conservation, if you had to choose?
Right. Oh, that's such a tough choice. I think I already revealed at the highest level, I think the biggest challenge is public awareness and not understanding yet, what it is that we can do and we can be talking about to motivate people to get engaged in a solution. And at the basic level, you hear scientists talk a lot these days about ecosystem services, and I've been involved in countless meetings and efforts to try to develop public awareness campaign about ecosystem services. I'm here to say that's probably a completely lost cause. So we all need to work more on how to make a personal connection and how to make the this place that doesn't cover 70% of the planet. In terms of living space, it's 99% of the space on this earth where life can exist is in the ocean. I mean, it's a much bigger deal than any of us think of, and yet it's out of sight and out of mind. And maybe put in more layperson's terms, I mean, the oceans are our lungs, they're our pantry, they're our playground, they're a vast storehouse of innovation for the future, and of course, they're also a huge source of inspiration for all of us. And so, how to bring those ideas home wherever people are is what I see to be the primary challenge that we have here. I was thinking about here in Portugal being a maritime nation with such a rich history, a couple of ideas about bringing it home here. I mean, first of all, seafood and the fishermen that catch it are such an important part of history here. And put simply, no fish, no fishermen. I mean, we can talk about the future of fishing communities, but until we address what's happening in the ocean, why are we even talking about it? I think, of course, in terms of the actual threats in the ocean, of course, global climate change is sort of what I like to call the mother of all threats to everything on Earth. But so beyond that, most immediately, I've been focusing a lot of my efforts and a lot of our messaging at the Monterey Bay Aquarium and a lot of the Packard Foundation's work on fisheries, because our relationship with extracting food from the ocean is the most basic and ancient relationship that humans have with the sea, and it's something that we can change. We have solutions. We know what to do. We have enough information to restore many of the degraded fisheries that are existing in the ocean right now. And so I think that's sort of the most immediate proximate thing that we can all attend to. As Jane said, it involves work at all levels. A lot of our global fish transverse, thousands of miles across our global oceans, and so those will require treaties and organizations like the UN to, figure out how to manage important fish like tunas that we all know and love. But also we have all of our coastal fisheries. I mean, imagine, seafood's such a huge part of all of your lives here in this room. I mean, imagine your next family meal or your children's or grandchildren's family gathering at a holiday with no seafood. Imagine that. That could happen, and it will happen for some kinds of seafood. It's probably already happening. So, thinking about what can we do right now? We have the solutions, we know what to do, but how can we spread the word, engage fishermen, force our governments to take action and find solutions that do engage the stakeholders, especially the fishermen, in new ways to manage our fisheries. The scientists say that managed well, global fisheries can be more productive. We can harvest more fish than we do today if we were doing it right. That right there to me is a very inspiring and remarkable fact that we all need to have as our North Star to head toward.
So probably you have been mentioning fisheries and the importance of fish stocks and the importance of our cultural habits, our food consumption, our diets. You would say that probably one of the biggest pressures on oceans for nature conservation relates to overfishing, to illegal fishing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the biggest pressures, but more importantly, it's something that we have solutions to right now. And the more, as global climate change is changing our oceans, the more we can protect ocean ecosystems so they can be resilient and sustain the impacts and the damages of both pollution and I mean, carbon pollution is one form of pollution. We have many other forms. The more the oceans can withstand these changes, And so fisheries are not the only issue, but they're a very clear-cut perturbation and impact that we're having on the oceans right now that we can turn around.
Thank you very much. And because you mentioned climate change, I'm going to ask you, Professor Viriato Romain Marques, you were an advisor to the European Commission on climate and energy. It is quite clear for scientists the links between oceans and climate change. The role of the oceans in mitigating climate change impacts, in mitigating the phenomena per se, the emissions of CO2, the need for adaptation of the oceans to climate change, and even probably it's starting now to emerge the idea of the importance of the blue economy also to address climate change. But nevertheless, if we look into the climate summits that have been succeeding and which had its climax in the Paris Agreement, we seldom see the link between oceans and climate change. Why is that? What's your opinion? How can we change that?
Okay, I think that we may depart from the beautiful film that started our event and that spoke about the voice of the oceans. The voice of oceans sometimes is very silent, and you need to study a lot, to work a lot to understand that. What you said, Tiago, about the connection, and Jane also spoke about that, the connection between climate change and the oceans is relatively new in scientific terms. We understand now that the oceans are a great sink for carbon dioxide, for the CO2 that we emit to the atmosphere. The situation would be rather worse if there was not that sink function of the oceans. But we know also that the voice of the ocean, sometimes silent, can be very angry, because we are now understanding that there is acidity of the oceans. The biodiversity is losing diversity, so there is a depletion. And we also know that on account of the depletion of the cryosphere, on account of the average rise of temperatures, surface temperatures, we are having great problems with the sea level rise and the increase of storms. So for countries like Portugal or the Netherlands that depend from the sea, we know that the voice of the oceans can be sometimes very bitter and very loud. I think that, anyway, the reason, coming back directly to your question, I think that in order to understand the delay between the problem and the political response is connected basically with two major factors. The first one is a matter of organization. I mean that we need to have effective policy response. We need to have the response at the same scale of the problem. And we are not going to anywhere if we are going to answer to global problems with sheer regional, local, national answers. And we are not going to answer to complex problems with simple responses. So that's the first problem. It's the problem of organization. The second is a problem of content. And I think that one of the topics that is connected with the work of the Foundation, it's the necessity to approach and to diminish the abyss between what we know in terms of science, so the scientific knowledge that was acquired through enormous investment and effort, and the quality of the political decisions. So how can we combine and inform the political decision process with good science, with clear science? That's very difficult, as we know. We are now witnessing a period in which, in many governments, in very important governments, we have political important voices that are saying bullshit, saying nonsense, saying that there is no connection between carbon dioxide and climate change. So this is a very, very hard task. We need to go in this way, so to organize the response at the level of the problems and at the same time to qualify the political response. And that's why we need also literacy, and we need also capacity building, and we need also a blue generation, and so on. So everything is connected.
That's interesting. So yesterday, I think it was Tony Emmett, you've said it yesterday, we probably need to go back to a speech where facts are facts again. Viriato, I was going to ask you another question now that you have warmed up with this answer, a different type of question, a question more probably about Portugal. This country has started, I would say, in the last 10, 15 years to rediscover the value of the ocean for its future, for its development. But the issue is even now, I would say, more firmly on the agenda, on the national agenda, than was for many years, even decades. But of course there are also skeptical people about the relevance of the ocean or about the relevance of an ocean agenda for this country. I know that this is strange for foreigners to understand, but it is such. So what would be your view about this? It's very important as well, of course, that there are different ideas, that you don't have unanimity about an issue, because if you have it, you don't have debate.
Yeah.
So what is your vision of this evolution, of this agenda evolution?
Well, we always keep saying that there is a deep connection, historically connection between Portugal and the sea and the oceans. That's a fact, one of those facts that we cannot confound or mistake. But at the same time, when we look into the future, we tend to understand the possible connection of Portugal with the sea many times in a narrow manner, meaning in a very specific economic predatory perspective. So we have a huge economic zone under our jurisdiction, so we have a kind of new frontier. I think that what is most important for us to understand is the fact that, of course, that we have resources in the sea, surely that we can change those natural resources in GDP, so in wealth, but we need to do that in a rather different way. Otherwise, it's not worthwhile. So the idea, the concept of sustainability is key in this factor. We need to organize the economic process, the government process, in a different way. And in that sense, I think that the contribution that Portugal can give to a new culture of the sea, to a new political governance of the sea, is not just in domestic terms. It's not just by the fact that we can increase our GDP twice or three times more, but it's giving an example. And I'm very glad to see that our colleagues coming from abroad were unanimous in saying that we have a role to play, giving an example and contributing to a new pattern in that connection of economies and nations with the sea environment and the marine environment.
Thank you. I was going to ask everyone probably to finish the same question, but before that, and I will start by you, Jane, because Viriato Romain Marques spoke about the need for science to be communicated to decision-making and to incorporate decision-making. As a scientist, yourself a marine scientist, how do you think the foundation can help explain science to the broader public, the broader audiences and decision-makers? And then I'm going to ask you to, in your question as well, to answer the question that I'm going to ask everyone, which is, why have you accepted to join the Oceano Azul Foundation and to cooperate with us on this task?
As a scientist, I've long been frustrated by the fact that there's a lot of information that scientists have that is not understood by the public. And I believe that a lot of that is on the fault of the shoulders of scientists. We teach students in universities to learn to speak the language of science. And that's very technical, it's very nuanced, it's very full of jargon. And I think that it's increasingly important, and we should have been doing this for a much longer time. It's important that scientists, part of their training should be to be bilingual, to speak the language of science and the language of lay people. And we don't teach scientists to do a very good job of either communicating or listening. And information needs to be transferred in both directions, because natural resource users like fishermen or local communities or native peoples or common people and children all have a wealth of knowledge that scientists need to hear. And so communication in two ways is increasingly important. And we talk now more about scientists engaging with society as opposed to just communicating, because it's not just taking knowledge and putting it into somebody else's head. It's actually sharing information and working together to find common solutions. And so a key opportunity for Oceano Azul Foundation is to create opportunities for meaningful engagement that is respectful both of science and scientific information, but respectful of local knowledge and traditional knowledge, and bringing those together to create new ways of solving the problems. We have a wealth of scientific information about a lot of these solutions, but those have not come just from the science. They've come from these collective efforts with fishermen, with politicians, with others. The science is not really only just about natural science, it's also social science and why people do what they do, why they believe what they do. I agreed to join the Board of Trustees for Oceano Azul, in part because I'm compelled by the vision and the opportunity to enable this new organization to provide hope, to provide information, awareness, but to help be creating new solutions because we all live on this same planet, and we desperately need leaders who can make things happen. And I believe that Oceano Azul is the foundation has the potential to be a very strong leader in this space. And I hope that will happen. I'm excited to be part of it.
Thank you. And Princess Laurentine, why have you accepted to join the Oceano Azul Foundation?
I think what came to mind when you asked that question, that Jean Monnet, the founder of the European Union, or Europe as we know it today, he said, thought cannot be divorced from action. So on the one hand, I am excited about an opportunity to rethink some of the framing of the issues. Connecting the dots on the one hand, but also to say, yes, we need to show the degradation of the ocean. Let's put it in people's faces, together with the beauty and together with the action that we can take. So not get into desperation, but into hope. And then I think when I look at this distinguished audience, I think that this is what the foundation is all about. And that if everyone here today, business leaders, NGOs, scientists, policymakers, everyone sitting here together, I think this is the combined effort and strength of this foundation. And that if every one of you were to walk away and feel disrupted by the fact that the Oceano Azul Foundation exists, and say, what can I do tomorrow to change my supply chains, to re-look at the way whether my science and research should not be connected to the research of another scientist, and start connecting the dots. That is this audience. This is connecting the dots. And if we can make that happen, I'm really excited and I'm delighted to play a part in that, apart from the fact that it's a great opportunity to have Portugal and the Netherlands as formerly, for us, also seafaring nations, discovering the world, that we will cooperate very closely.
Thank you very much. I think it was the best way possible of explaining what is the difference that a foundation like this can make, and why you all will make a difference, a fairly large difference in the foundation. I'm afraid that we have run out of time. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to wrap up this panel now, because the President of the Republic of Portugal will be joining us in moments. I will do it afterwards in his presence, but I'm going to ask you please for a hand of applause to our trustees and council trustees. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, please.